Some very big news last night. There were a lot of primaries across the country, but it was a local House race that we had our eye on, and that is Congressman Steve King from Iowa was defeated in his Republican presidential primary, his Republican House primary. So we can show the results of that last night. He was overwhelmingly defeated, actually, in that runoff after almost 2 decades in the House, and he was famously, of course, taken off of the House committees. I mean, it's one of the most extraordinary events I've seen in intra-Republican politics, Krystal, because you have the RNC chairwoman, the president, the entire Republican leadership being like, thank God he lost. And yeah. I mean, they didn't put a single dollar behind him. They made it known they wanted nothing to do with him. And it looks like the constituents in that district just completely had enough of Steve King. So it really is a big development, especially in light of, the moment that we're all in right now.
Well, that's very true. And I mean, the comments that got him kicked off the committees, it was something like, when did saying white nationalism become a problem? I mean, he's just, over and over and over again, directly fanned the flames of racism. He's just been over the top in completely racist, objectionable language. And this race is one that I happen to know a lot about because I know his Democratic challenger, J.D. Scholten, quite well. We've had him on the show, of course. Mm-hmm. J.D.'s a great guy and really in touch with that rural district. I've actually traveled around that district some with J.D. and actually with Bernie Sanders when he was there stumping for J.D. last time around. J.D. came very close to beating Steve King in this district last cycle, within a few points. And it is a very rural, very large, and very Republican district. So for JD to have even come that close was a remarkable feat. I'm going to say he moved the Democratic performance like 20 points. I mean, he really came close to taking out Steve King. And the concern for Republicans this time around was initially there were a lot of candidates who jumped into the race. And so there was a concern that even though Steve King had lost a lot of ground in terms of popularity, that his base would stick with him and the other candidates would sort of divide the vote. Well, it happened that the vote really coalesced around this one guy, Feenstra, who's, he's a sort of standard issue type Republican. He's going to vote with the party. He's going to support Trump. He's going to be all kinds of things that I don't like and don't appreciate. But I think everybody can celebrate, that Steve King, that the constituents decided they'd had enough of Steve King. Of course, for my friend JD, that means the November election is going to be a lot tougher. Much more uphill, given that he doesn't have a nationally recognized villain in Steve King to run against, but certainly something to celebrate in any case. There was another election in Ferguson, Missouri, of course, site of protests several years back that we all followed over the killing of Michael Brown. That's really where Black Lives Matter started. Ella Jones has just become the first Black woman mayor of Ferguson. So again, really, noteworthy, historic moment, especially in that city, especially during that time. At the same time, in one of the ongoing primaries that a lot of us on the left are following, Eliot Engel, who is a longtime representative there, he's kind of gotten himself into trouble in a couple of ways. First of all, you'll recall Joe Crowley, when he lost to AOC, one of the big arguments against him was that he wasn't there, wasn't in the district, wasn't in touch with the people anymore in a rapidly diversifying district. Well, similar dynamic with Eliot Engel. He actually lied to a reporter and got caught about being in the district during coronavirus. He wasn't. He was, in the DC environs that whole time, hunkering down in his home there. So that was a problem. And now new comments, hot mic comments, have surfaced where he essentially says he's trying to speak at a protest rally, and he says, "I only care because I have a primary." Let's take a listen to that moment.
Then I got to then go down the list, and it's just too many folks here.
If I didn't have a primary, I wouldn't care.
Say that again?
If I didn't have a primary, I wouldn't care.
Don't do that to me.
If I didn't have a primary, I wouldn't care. Yikes.
Don't you just love
a racial justice protest?
They say the quiet part out loud on a hot mic. It's just so great. I don't actually know the context of that. I assume it was about speaking order or something like that, but it just demonstrates how so many of these congressmen, I mean, this isn't just a Democratic thing, which is that if one of these people serve like 18, 20 years, they really feel entitled to their seats. They think it should just be a coronation, and they are not used to a real challenge. And that's exactly what we see in this particular case. It's just amazing that he's willing to go out there and openly say that this is only because he has a primary challenger, and he's trying, as hard as he can with the optics. But it turns out, I think something like this is really going to hurt him in the district, given how AOC took out Joe Crowley in a very similar manner.
Very similar dynamics. His primary opponent is Jamal Bowman, who's a high school principal, who has spoken very powerfully as an African-American man about his own experiences with police brutality. And there were some other progressive challengers in the race. They all basically got out and coalesced behind Jamal Bowman. That primary happens on June 23rd, so that's later this month. But not a great development for Eliot Engel. Feeds into this perception that he is out of step with the district, that he is not present, that he doesn't really care. I do want to say, his explanation is, I was just talking about in the context of, I wouldn't fight for valuable speaking time if it didn't matter in the primary, but you can interpret those comments as you will. A race to certainly keep a close eye on. Could be a really interesting one.
Yeah, and at the same time, there were primaries all over the country last night. I think we have a map of some of those things, and Joe Biden actually winning. Obviously he's winning in those, but now only about 73 delegates away from officially clinching the Democratic nomination. Of course, he's the presumptive Democratic nominee, and I don't really know why we're still going through all these things, despite the fact that there's a pandemic and all this other craziness that's going on. But you can see there that Biden is inching closer to the official title. So it's it's interesting to see, certainly.
Boy, I'm excited about that, Saagar. Thanks for that update.
All right. So we'll have surprising after that.